Long before electric grids, compressors, and insulated plastics, ancient communities living in some of the hottest regions on Earth developed a cooling method that still outperforms modern electric coolers under the right conditions. This was not folklore or convenience. It was a survival technology rooted in physics, materials science, and environmental awareness. The ancient water jar cooler, often called an evaporative jar system, kept water and food dramatically cooler than surrounding air using nothing but clay, airflow, and patience. For soldiers, travellers, and desert-dwelling populations, this method preserved hydration and prevented heat exhaustion, when modern solutions would have failed entirely. How porous clay turned evaporation into reliable cooling power. The effectiveness of the ancient water jar cooler depends on one principle: evaporative cooling. Unglazed clay is naturally porous. When water stored inside slowly seeps to the outer surface, it evaporates. Evaporation pulls heat from the remaining water inside the vessel, lowering its temperature. This process continues as long as the surrounding air is dry enough to accept moisture. In arid and semi-arid climates, the cooling effect can drop internal temperatures by several degrees, often reaching levels comparable to powered coolers. No moving parts, no fuel, no electricity. Why the jar design mattered more than the water itself. Ancient jars were thick-walled, unglazed, and often shaped to maximize surface area. This increased evaporation efficiency. Narrow necks reduced heat exchange with outside air when drawing water, while broad bodies encouraged steady cooling. Some cultures nested smaller jars inside larger ones, with damp sand between them, amplifying the effect. Others relied on single large vessels placed strategically in shaded, breezy locations. Design choices were deliberate, not decorative. How placement determined success or failure. The jar cooler only works when airflow supports evaporation. Ancient users placed jars near doorways, windows, or elevated stands where air moved freely. Shade was essential. Direct sunlight overwhelms evaporative cooling and defeats the system. In desert settlements, jars were often placed on rooftops at night to cool rapidly, then moved indoors during the day to retain lower temperatures. This daily rhythm matched environmental cycles. Electric coolers ignore environment. Ancient systems worked with it. Why this method often beats electric coolers in remote or extreme conditions. Electric coolers depend on continuous power and mechanical integrity. In high heat, they struggle. Batteries drain. Compressors overheat. Ancient jar coolers cannot break down in the same way. As long as water is available and humidity remains moderate, cooling continues uninterrupted. There is no noise, no maintenance, and no dependence on supply chains. Reliability is the true advantage. How ancient soldiers and travellers relied on this technology. Historical records and archaeological evidence show widespread use across North Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and parts of southern Europe. Armies on the move used clay vessels to keep drinking water cooler and safer. Cooler water reduced bacterial growth and encouraged proper hydration. In prolonged heat exposure, this reduced heat-related illness more effectively than rationing alone. Cooling preserved endurance. So let's talk about how, modern users can actually apply this ancient method today. A modern version really just requires an unglazed clay pot, some clean water, and a bit of airflow. You simply fill the pot with drinking water, loosely cover the opening to keep out any unwanted debris, and place it somewhere shaded and breezy. Wetting the outer surface at first, actually speeds up the cooling effect. In dry climates, the temperature inside the pot can drop quite a lot within just a few hours. Even in places with moderate humidity, you'll notice the water stays cooler than the air around it all day. This trick works in camps, off-grid homes, during emergencies, or whenever the power goes out. Now, why did ancient households use this system for food storage? Well, they stored milk, fruits and cooked grains in these jars to slow spoilage. Lower temperatures meant bacteria just couldn't multiply as quickly. And for modern campers, using a jar cooler can actually preserve perishables longer than, say, an insulated box without ice. The beauty of this method is that it scales up or down easily, depending on your needs. But you might wonder why modern materials struggle to replicate this effect. Plastic, for example, is non-porous, so it can't really cool by evaporation. Metal, on the other hand, transfers heat far too quickly. Most modern coolers rely on insulation, not active cooling. So once the ice melts or the power goes out, well, the cooling stops. Clay does quite the opposite, actually. It actively pulls heat away through evaporation, as long as the conditions are right. In the end, nature does the work for you, continuously, as long as you let it. Of course, there are some limitations that ancient users understood very well. This system just doesn't work as effectively in high humidity. Communities back then adapted by changing where they placed their jars, increasing airflow, or even switching to nighttime cooling cycles when the air was drier. They truly understood their environment and adjusted their behavior to match. And honestly, modern users will need to do the same. Technology, no matter how clever, never replaces awareness. So, why does this ancient solution still matter today? Well, as energy costs keep climbing and climate extremes become more common, these low-tech, resilient cooling methods are more valuable than ever. The old water jar cooler needs no infrastructure, and, frankly, it can't fail in any catastrophic way. It really shows a mindset where survival depended on understanding physics rather than trying to overpower it. That very mindset is what built civilizations in some of the harshest environments on Earth. If you value serious historical knowledge that still delivers real-world advantages, do consider supporting Echoes of Valor. Subscribe to the channel, share this guide with your fellow history and survival enthusiasts, and help preserve the practical wisdom that kept people alive long before modern technology ever existed.